Many of you saw another ICE-related shooting that happened over the weekend. And now we are at a point where it seems what Logan had been calling for, I had been calling for, and many have been, is that the leaders who are at the end of the day responsible for all of this on both sides are seeming to sit down. We know that the Border Patrol Commander, Greg Bovino, has departed Minnesota, and now that command is being taken over by Tom Homan, the border czar, who had been absent from this conversation for a while. But Logan, we're seeing both the mayor of Minneapolis as well as the governor, Tim Walz, have spoken with the president. They are saying things like, we are on the same wavelength, as well as seeing productive conversations with Tom Homan, the border czar. What are your thoughts?
You're right. This is something that we have been calling for since the very beginning, when the ICE raids started happening, and then everything that was happening, that dark cloud that I said was hanging over Minnesota. I said what we needed to do was get President Trump, Tim Walz, whoever it was, the mayor, to actually do their job, get in a room and meet together.
After the first shooting, we said, if it continues to escalate, more Americans will die because of confrontation with law enforcement. It's not even putting a blame on either one. People are making choices to be in the face of law enforcement, and law enforcement are on heightened alert because of, you see death threats online at these individual agents. You see them being doxxed. You hear calls to murder ICE agents by Americans. The whole situation was it had already reached a boiling point. It was at the point of no return, and we saw another death of an American citizen because of all this. It finally looks like leaders are thinking we have to do something, and that's what you're seeing from the president and the leaders in Minnesota now.
Yeah, and I think that is it's time, and I think it has been time since the very beginning. I think President Trump's style of diplomacy, if you will, his politicking works on certain levels. When it comes to civil unrest, when it comes to Americans getting killed in the streets, there is a time, and I would say the same to Tim Walz, there's a time where all of this bloviating, all of this, built up posts on X or on Truth Social that go back and forth and amplify hate, amplify anger over and over and over again. Eventually, this is what happens. And you may say that, you've seen a video that maybe is different than the version we've seen. I feel like we all get served what we want to see. But at the end of the day, 2 American citizens have been shot and killed by officers that were on duty as ICE officers. I don't think there's a right in this. I think you have people who are the ICE officers who may be doing what they've been told to do, but maybe need more training on how this goes on. You have agitators who are being aggravated by their state leaders. And now we are at the point, like Will said, where it felt like the point of no return. And I actually don't know if I agree with this point of no return. I think this is the point that maybe we had to get to. And I hate that we had to get to this point where it had to be bloodshed of American citizens to get to this point. But maybe that's what had to happen. You can go back and see all of the times throughout history where the Democrats did not stand up for conservatives that were shot also or murdered in the streets. That happened many, many times. But that doesn't mean it should work the other way. I have always been the person who's preached the fact that we don't always have to play by the same handbook. And if the same playbook says, that we should be celebrating or defending people who are getting killed, that's just not the way it goes. And I like the fact that you have President Trump and Governor Walz actually doing what I feel like is the job of the president and of state leaders, and working together to figure out what this crisis is on the streets, whether you agree with the crisis or not. I think there's a lot of people that say, hey, I don't disagree that ICE should exist. I'm not a person saying abolish ICE. That's not my MO. I think there's also people going, there's a difference between border security, which I think honestly, the left did not feel that way over the last 4 years. But I think a lot of people, normal human beings, felt there should be some changes to border security. And what we're seeing in the streets of a lot of our states, but specifically in Minnesota. And look, I don't point the blame at anyone specifically. I point the blame at the fact that our state and local leaders decided to make this more politics and less about humanity. And I do think there is a Christian side to this, a humanitarian side to this, where this can be done, where you can have people who are not supposed to be here removed from the United States without it turning in to chaos in the streets. Because we saw it happen successfully, maybe not to the right, definitely not during Biden, but during President Bush, during the first Trump years, during even President Obama, a lot of deportations happening, and you didn't see this on the streets.
Logan, and I think one thing, and I want to get into some of these statements that were put out by the mayor, by the governor, by the president, by Tom Homan himself. But I think what you've got here is a situation, and this is something that you and I were concerned about and that we've talked about a lot, is that, you know, it wasn't as if the people calling to resist ICE and to get out in the streets were community organizers or liberal activists. It was the governor of the state himself that was labeling the federal law enforcement officers as the Gestapo, as fascists, and making that rhetoric amplified. But then not just saying, I will nationalize I will deploy the National Guard, I will deploy the state police, I will deal with this. It was, in fact, him that was telling his own citizens to get out there and do that. That is weaponizing your own constituents, weaponizing and putting in harm's way your people. It's one thing if saying, I applaud those that are speaking out, but he was continuing to push this. There's also stuff that have come out about this Signal chat where there were thousands of people, including people high up in his administration, coordinating a lot of these activities, not with officials of the state, but with citizens themselves. And I think some of that responsibility falls on these leaders that are willing to put their citizens in harm's way and use them as a political pawn. And that's what we've seen quite a bit here. We've seen the usage of the citizens as political pawns, and that has led to the death of 2 Americans.
Yeah, and I think at this point, there was even a lot of references to Nazis, to Anne Frank, that people would be reading about this the same way they read about Anne Frank. And there are moments that I feel like you can talk about these kind of things. Whenever you start invoking Holocaust-type rhetoric, though, I think a lot of people, specifically in the Jewish community, start to back up a little bit and go, okay, hold on. This is not the same thing. Anne Frank was, in fact, a citizen of the country who was being targeted because of her ethnic background / religious beliefs. And you start talking about Anne Frank in that situation, and it becomes more and more hostile. There seems to be a breath of fresh air from Tom Homan, that Tom Homan is who people are celebrating right now as potentially the savior in this situation. And I don't think any of us really predicted that, but I guess it's because he has a history of working with other administrations.
Well, and I think, Logan, that's the problem. The left demonized Tom Homan when he was brought on as border czar because he's a serious official. And he had a long career working with Border Patrol, with the Department of Homeland Security, and had even gotten awards under previous administrations like Barack Obama for his work. But because he worked with President Trump, he was demonized. But now all of a sudden, he's like the peacemaker. He's the broker of this. But this is a post he put out on X that says, today I met with Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, and the top law enforcement officials to discuss the issues on the ground in Minnesota. We all agree that we need to support our law enforcement officers and get criminals off the streets. While we don't agree on everything, these meetings were a productive starting point, and I look forward to more conversations with key stakeholders in the days ahead. President Trump has been clear. He wants American cities to be safe and secure for law-abiding residents, and they will be.